Hello and welcome to part 6. In this video we'll be looking at some materials where I have been inspired by the Vespa motorcycle, so check out the website if you want to do the same. Without further ado, let's jump in. And here we are back in Blender, and previously this is where we were, and yes, finally materials, great news. However, first some minor edits to the model. As you can see there, I've made a little list of things I need to work through to make sure the materials work nicely. So let's start off with the first one, and that's add 4 loop cuts to the tyre cover. And that's the part that I'm referring to there. So we'll tab into edit mode, and you can see we have a mirror modifier applied. Well, not applied, assigned. So we need to apply that. Make sure merge is clipping is on. So with that applied, let's tab back into edit mode. And before we can add the loop cuts, we need to delete this central edge loop just there. So with that selected, so Alt, click, hold down Control, delete, and that will dissolve that edge loop. And with that done, press Control R and add 4 loop cuts. And right click to leave them in place. And that's it for this part. Let's head over back to our notes and take that off. Thank you very much, Mr. Buble. Okay, let's move on to the back of the head. You don't have to do this part, of course, it's just to add a bit more interest. So I'm going to tab into edit mode, switch to face mode, and select this face. And press E to extrude, and just bring that out just a little bit. I'm just having a look there to see if that's distance that I like, and then I'm going to press I to inset it. Now you don't have to do this part, of course. I would actually leave the mean crease set as 1. I turned it back to 0 for some strange reason, but there you go. So that's also done now. Let's take that off our list. Excellent. Right. Okay, let's move on to the next one. And in this case, we're going to make some holes for where the camera eyes are located. So you have these 2 circles here, these 2 elements. If I move them away, you can see there's a back plate there, which is that part there. So let's just make some holes in that. And for that, I'm going to use the excellent knife tool, which is part of Blender's tool set. You can see if I look through the other side, that's where these camera lenses are located. So let's isolate those by pressing the question mark key. If I turn X-ray on, you can see it looks a little bit messy. My apologies for the phone noises. And what we want to do is going to isolate. Let's put that on silent. Let's get back to the video. We're going to isolate those front faces so that we don't get confused with the back faces. So I'm going to switch to side view, switch to wireframe mode, and press C for circle select. And I'm going to select all of these faces and press H to hide them. That way they're not in our way. So with that done, let's switch over to the front view by pressing 1 on the numpad. And I'm looking for the knife tool here and I could not see it. It's right there. Yeah, not that one. So you can press K to do the same thing. And that's the knife tool in action. So as you can see, it highlights when you move it over edges or vertices. So I'm going to make a cut just inside the lens elements. In fact, I probably should have made it a little bit more snug inside the cuts there, or the inside cuts, I should say. So feel free to do that. So I just work my way around. You can click on an empty space as well, of course. But I'm going to click along all of the edges that are already there, so we get some nice clean cuts. Once you've done that, like so, and we click on the last one to connect it, and then right click and then enter, and that will commit the cut you've just made. You can see there, if we switch to face mode, we can select all of these faces. Just to make sure that they're the right ones, I'm just going to have a quick look around. It does get a bit confusing with the X-ray mode on, so I'm just making sure that I've got everything I need. And I'm going to press I and inset just a little bit. And with that done, delete faces. Now we have a hole where those eyes go. Let's turn off X-ray mode. If I select that and move it out of the way, you can see there we've got a hole where we want it to be. So we can cross that off our list now. Let's hit the question mark key and get back to our full view. And let's bring our list back up again and tick that off as well. Okay, so now we're going to create some cuts, or laser cuts as I like to call them, because they need to go right through, just like a lightsaber would, into this part here. And that's the part with the the brow, just overhanging the lenses just there. So this is the part we want. And we need to switch to the side view, and you can either turn on X-ray mode or wireframe mode. And I'll just show you what I mean. So it cuts right through like this. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 cuts. Let me just erase that. I think I missed a bit there, didn't I? I wonder what that was. Okay. So let's press the K key again to bring up the knife tool. And you want to start from the very top of the model. Ah, yes. Lightsaber. From the very top of the model right through to the bottom, and you'll notice at the bottom of Blender there you have all of these options for this tool, and the one you want to turn on is the C key, which is for cut through. So make sure you press that, and cut through should be on, and you want to click and then right click to continue the operation. So click there, right click, go back to the top, move to the bottom, click, and finally right click, enter, and there you go. We've cut right through that perfectly. And that's it for that part. Very simple stuff. Let's bring our notes back and tick that off. Let's move on to the next part, and that's to do with the front of the eye parts, not the outer one, the one inside. And we want to flatten that one there, just extruding out. So let's isolate those by pressing the question mark key. Switch to vertex mode and wireframe. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to left click Alt and left click there, select those loop of vertices, and press Shift S to move the 3D cursor to that location. And we change our transform point to the 3D cursor. So we're going to use that to scale towards the 3D cursor. So select those vertices just there, press S for scale, Y for the Y axis. Yours could be a different axis, of course, and you want it something like that. So it's pretty flat. Let's switch to edge mode. And you can see we have a subdiv modifier and a mirror modifier. I'm just going to turn off the subdivision modifier and the mirror, why not? Switch into X-ray mode and alt click this edge loop, and then Control B to bevel it with one segment. Sorry, two segments. And that's all we need to do. Let's turn those modifiers back on. And that's looking okay. So the next step is to apply a solidify modifier. Let's just turn X-ray on so we can see that happening. You can see there we've got some thickness, too much of course. And the important thing to remember is the stack order for these modifiers. So I'm going to turn on even thickness and high quality normals and bring down the thickness to something like 0.00125. Just like that. And that's all we need to do there. And if you're happy with that, you can apply the solidify modifier. And at this point I thought I'd check the face orientation, but for some bizarre reason it wasn't working, so I turned on the normal, what do you call these, vectors? Look like hairs, don't they? To make sure that they're pointing in the right direction. So I just turned that off there. And with that done, We can then press the question mark key to get back to our robot, bring our list back and tick that off. And finally, let's create the lens elements for the eyes, or the camera, effectively. So with those selected, or that part selected, I'm going to press the question mark key to isolate it and switch to the side view. I'm just checking my second monitor, by the way. So if you see me pause for a moment, it's because I need to just double check that I've done everything correctly. So I'm going to switch to wireframe mode. And what I want to do now is add a single vertex, which kind of confused me, to be honest. But before I do that, with that object selected, Shift S and move the 3D cursor to the selected object. And if we head over to Preferences, you want to make sure that you've got Add Mesh Extra Objects enabled in the add-ons. That will enable you to get access to the single vert, add single vertex. And that immediately puts you into edit mode, as you can see. Now, what I hadn't realized at this point is I moved the transform point. Well, the transform point is using the 3D cursor, as we did in the previous stage. So when I moved the vertex, it kind of threw me off. So I'm just making sure that that's exactly what happened there. Like, did I create the single vertex or not? You can see if I move it to somewhere near the front, it snaps back to there, but it doesn't actually snap back to there. The transform axis does. The vertex doesn't. So I'm trying to figure out here what I've done wrong. I left this in the video because these mistakes happen, and you don't realize what's going on. Why is that happening? So I deleted that one and re-added the single vertex. And at that point, I realized I've got the 3D cursor on as the transform point, and I changed it back to median. With that done, and with the vertex selected, press E to extrude and drag it up to create these lens elements. I'm going to create 4 parts to this, and feel free to Google lens elements or camera lens elements, and you will find plenty of images to inspire you for the kind of shapes you need to be creating. So what I've done there is duplicate the last vertex with Shift D, moved it over on the Y-axis, and then pressed E again to extrude it, like so. Now the second one I've made is about similar to the first shape, but thinner. So again, Shift D to duplicate, move it over on the X-axis, sorry, the Y-axis in my case, E to extrude, and all we're doing here is creating a profile shape. So it's got no geometry, it's simply vertices and edges, and no faces. So let's carry on and do that. That's our third element, and Shift D, move it on the Y-axis, something like that, and E to extrude. And there you go. Now before we move on to the next part, we need to make sure these vertices here at the bottom are all aligned and at the 0 location. So with all of those selected, I'm going to press S for scale, Z for the Z-axis, and then 0. And you can see there in the top right, it's not quite on the 0. We flattened them with 0 scale, but we need to make sure that at the 0 location in the world, or at that location anyway. So with that done, let's tap into object mode and head over to the modifiers. I'm just going to rename that quickly to lenses. So at modifiers, let's add a screw modifier. And it's using the wrong axis, so switch it to Y if that works for you. And it does this lovely rotation effect. Feel free to change the steps. I think 16 is fine because we'll be adding a subdiv modifier. And all of a sudden, my face orientation is working, so I made sure to take that onto flip, so there's no red. because red is bad, remember? And let's add a subdiv modifier. And finally, I'm going to tab into edit mode and edit these profiles just a little bit more, and by beveling some of these vertices. So to do that, you can press Ctrl-Shift-B. Yes, it would be a disaster. This quite shocked me. This rather shocked me, to be honest. But what the heck is going on? So head over to the modifier. Calculate order is the one that should be ticked on, for me at least. And then flip normals off. So with that working, tab back into edit mode, and I'm going to bevel these vertices some more. So Ctrl-Shift-B to bevel vertices. Really handy shortcut and editing tool there. And that's all we need to do for these. Excellent. Right. Let's switch back to our lovely list. You can see there. Actually, I forgot to add a mirror modifier to mirror it to the other side of the head. So make sure you do that, unlike me. Let's bring our list back and cross that off. Cool. With all that done, we can now actually start making some materials. I've already created a temporary material, which is that metallic one you can see there. Let's just select the this HDRI that's built into Blender, so we get a neutral grey environment to work with. And in our shading environment here, workspace, if you just switch it back to object, if it's set to world, it probably isn't, but mine was because I was dabbling with a HDRI. Anyway, you can see that I've got a temp material applied to most of the model. And I'm just going to work on this part first, at the back. So I'm going to remove that material and create a new one, and very quickly copy and paste that. I'm going to call it Robot Metallic Base Chrome. Simple names, eh? Right, really basic stuff here. So first of all, metallic set to 1, specular 0.8. Roughness we'll get back to in a second. Let's add a clear coat, why not? It's always nice for metallic stuff. It gives it like a lacquer, very shiny lacquer coat. So there we have it. Doesn't look too great at the moment because the roughness is still at the default of 0.5. But we're not going to change that there. We're going to add a Voronoi texture. And look at that. How did I do that? With Node Wrangler, of course. And make sure you have that enabled. Just in preferences, search for Node. And make sure that's ticked on. And you can then select, say, the Voronoi texture as I did there, and hit Ctrl-T. That will create the other two nodes for you. Anyway, let's connect that up to roughness. Ctrl-Shift and click the Voronoi texture to view that only in the viewport. And I'm going to increase the scale to 3000. And you get this very fine, almost spore-like texture there going on. Random is set to 1, of course. Ctrl-Shift click to see the effect on the principled BSDF. And now we want to add a color or vector color ramp and drop it in between those two. And the value I'm going to put as 0.125 for the one on the left and the marker on the right. Let's just zoom in to see the difference there. So the white one, I'm going to use a value of 0.175. You can see there we've got this subtle grey looking effect there. That's looking pretty good. Let's leave that. Let's go with that. Of course, you don't have to do what I'm doing. Let's work on the next material. And this one I'm going to set a specular of 0.75. In fact, not the next material, the temp material. I'm changing that to something a bit more obvious because I don't want to have two chrome things going on. So what I'm going to do next is go through all of the model, select all of the components that I want this chrome to be applied to. So I've sped that up because it's quite boring to do sit here and watch me do that. So apply that anywhere you think that should be. Let's just do the tyre as well there, or the wheel, the rim as it were. Some of the battery or power elements there, those connecting rings, part of the light sensor or whatever that is. And we're almost there, I think. We'll come back to some of these later on, because we'll be adding more than one material to some of these objects. Okay, let's create the metallic blue one now. As I said at the beginning, I got kind of inspired by Vespa, the motorcycles. So I went to their website and I initially started off with the red, the classic red from Vespa. But yeah, it's okay. But it then started to clash with the Italian colours that I introduced into the model, because the Italian colours does include a red anyway. I'll just put some values up there on the screen for you to copy if you like for these color ramps. So I copied the same principle as before with the Voronoi texture. All I'm doing is changing the values for this color ramp, and of course the color. And there's the color value that I've used. I really like that colour, I think that looks lovely. I'll just show you the RGB there and the hex value. Okay. And like before, you want to go through the model and apply that to everything else later on. Before we do that, let's also add a slight bump node to this as well. So I'm going to use a noise texture for that. So we can just move these to the side and connect that up to the vector. And I'm going to drag that and connect it up in a second. But first of all, let's change this to 900 and 3 for the detail. And the roughness I set at 0.3. Now we're going to connect this to the normal. And of course that's not going to work, as you can see there in the viewport. We need to add a bump node to tell Blender this is actually a bump texture. It's connected to the wrong place there. It should be in height, not normal. And let's just change that. But I'm going to turn down the strength to 0.01 and switch it to height. And that's working fine now. As you can see there, put it back to 1 just so you can see the effect. And let's put it back to 0.01. So it's a very subtle effect, but it gives you that slightly bumpy painted look, which you may like. You don't have to add that, of course, but I thought it added a nice bit of detail. So once again, I'm going to fast forward here because I'm just applying the same material to other parts of the model. And what I'm looking for here is some nice contrast with the chrome and different elements of the same models really. So tab into edit mode as I'm doing here and select some of the faces and apply a different material. So I'm going to switch to face mode, use the C key for circular selection, right click to escape that, then Control plus on the numpad to grow my selection. And once I've got my selected faces, I will switch back to, by the way, I went into full screen mode with Control spacebar. So with that done, I can add a second material slot, select the chrome one we created earlier, and hit the assign key. And just like that, we've got 2 materials on the same object. So as before, I'm going to edit into this object, tab into edit mode, select these faces there, add a new material slot and add the blue and assign it. So the top part, the same thing. Might be a little bit trickier because we have quite a bit of geometry here. So what I'm going to do is I might make it, there you go. So I'm going to select the front faces and then just press plus, control numpad plus to grow the selection and deselect these ones there, which I kind of figured out wasn't the best way to do this. So what I would do instead is select those manually. Make sure you got those selected just like that. That was the better way to do it, and apply the chrome to that part. I think that's looking pretty cool. So a quick inspection, having done that. It's very easy to miss some of these parts because some of them are quite small. So you can always come back and fix it if you spot anything. With that said, let's move on to this rubber, generic rubber material. I've already created a temporary one called Tyre, so I'm just going to duplicate that by clicking the icon just there. Which I didn't do in the end, as you can see, so there you go, sorry about that. I actually removed it and created a new one from scratch. I called it Robo Rubber. I put the roughness to 0.6. I'm just checking again on my second screen there to see what I did. And the hex value is 1F, 1F, 1F. So it's pretty dark. Could have been darker actually. Still looks a bit too bright there. So I'm going to add a noise texture. And with that selected, press Ctrl T to add these nodes. Make sure you use object as the coordinates. And let's connect this to the normal. Like we did before, now we need to add a vector bump node. Drop that on the line. Switch it to height, not normal. You can see there it's too strong, so let's turn that down. I'm going to use 0.125. And for the noise texture, I'm going to use 350 for the scale. The detail set to 5.9. It's a very arbitrary number. And roughness set to 1. And I'll click invert as well actually. We're not quite done yet. Let's get some more space and move that to the side. And add a color ramp. Drop that there. Control Shift and click so we can see the effect of the color ramp. And on the left marker, I'm going to drag that in so we crush some of those blacks. So that basically creates some flatter areas. Perhaps a little bit more. That's all we need to do for that. In fact, I may have come back to the specular value. Oh, there you go. So 0.4 for the specular. So that's our rubber material done. So as you can see by now, everything is very clean. This is a new product approach. So showroom condition, brand new. No fingerprints on it, no scuff marks, no scratches, no dirt. So that's why everything is looking pristine and clean. And I'm going to tab into this part again, select these faces, create a new material slot, and assign the base chrome to that part as well. Once more, adds a bit more interest. And for these studs, I guess, I'm going to apply some of that rubber material to that as well. So I'll select this one, Control Numpad Plus to grow the selection. Make sure I've got everything there. Invert it by hitting Control I. Add a new slot, select the rubber we created and assign it. And those are instances, so everything's been updated for us. And again, I'm going to go through the model, select other parts, and apply the same material there. And we've got this little connector down here. Tab into edit mode, select these parts, and assign the rubber to that as well. Let's do it to the cables as well. In hindsight, you could colour the cables differently actually. Different colours would be quite nice. And I think I'm going to apply the rubber material just in there as well. And to the handle, or whatever that is. Yeah, it looks cool. Okay, let's have a look at the headlight material. Not to repeat myself, but as you can see, these are pretty basic materials. And let's look at the colour for this, as you saw there. The emission value, there's the hex value if you want to use the same. And that's pretty much it for that one. Nice and easy. Now let's look at the Tyre material. As I said, I already had one called Tyre as a temporary material. So I'm going to work with that and increase the specular, decrease it to 0.3. The roughness I'm going to put at 0.6. Let's just check my second screen again. And the colour is going to be quite dark, darker than the rubber, in fact. And I've used 101010. So binary numbers. Who knew? That's looking pretty good. And I'm going to select the rubber material. Box select all of these nodes and copy them with Ctrl+C. Switch over to the Tyre material and Ctrl+V to paste them in there and connect that up to the normal. Now we have a bump node texture added to the Tyre as well. You can make adjustments to this, of course. I went with 250 and a detail level of 7. And feel free to play with this. So I really crunched these colours down, the black and the white. Let's see what that looks like. It's not too shabby. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Okay, let's move on to the glass material for these shapes there. Let's remove the temporary one that's assigned to it and create a new material, and I'm going to call that robot camera eye cover. There you go. I'll come up with the most stupid names. Okay, so specular, I'm going to put all the way to 1. The roughness, bring down to 0. And the transmission all the way up to 1. And I did forget to change the IOR value. I believe that should be 1.1. I'll do that later on, but I just forgot to do it at this stage. So with that done, I'm selecting this little light sensor thing and create a new material for it. I'm going to call it robot light sensor. The roughness I'm going to set to 0.3, so it has a slight shine to it, or smoothness to it. Transmission 0.5, bang in the middle. It's hard to see the effect of that, but it's working fine. That's what you need to do for that one. So for the next part, let's have a look at the camera lens elements. Let's create a new material for this one. I'm going to call those eye lenses. Okay, what do we need to do here? Firstly, let's stick the the specular all the way to 1, the roughness all the way to 0. And I'm going to move this over a little bit and make some space because I'm going to add a glossy BSDF. This reminds me of the old days of Blender when you used to mix a glossy with a diffused shader before we had the principle of BSDF. Anyway, I'm going to use this hex value. Use whatever color you like for this element. I went for like an aqua green blue thing. That's a nice color. And we need to mix that with the glossy. Can you guess how to do that? Well, there's the clue, mix shader. And let's drag that into the second slot. Now, if you've never used a mix shader before, I'll get to that in a second actually. Let's go back to the principle BSDF, transmission all the way to 1, and an IOR of 1.6. I can't remember what I based that off, but I did some research on glass like this for lenses, and 1.6 was the closest I can find. Yeah, that colour's fine. This one's fine. Nice. Roughness for that one, change all the way to 0. We get that lovely shine there. What that's left to do really is change the factor in the mixed shader. Because at the moment it's mixing 50-50. So left is that one, right is the glossy. I'm going to use a value of 0.08. So it's mostly the principle with BSDF. In fact, let's go with 0.07. And that's it for the lenses. Like I said, don't forget to add a mirror modifier, because I forgot to do that earlier on. So it's not mirrored on the other side. And I've just realized the IOR for the lens cover should be 1.1. So we'll change that to 1.1. There you go. So I've tried different HDRIs there to see what that looks like. And I cut that out of the video because I spent quite a few minutes just checking stuff there. One last thing I want to do here is this outer part there is not actually solid, hasn't got a thickness to it. So as it's metal, all that metallic material is showing and reflected through the lenses, which you don't want ideally. So I'm going to add a second material. I'm just going to reuse the rubber and do some very basic editing to add an inner skin effectively to this shape. I thought I had done that, and here I was trying to select these faces like that and assign the rubber, but then I realized it doesn't actually have a thickness. So what I would do is I think it's going to dawn on me in a second now. So I'm going to select this edge loop and switch to the side view with 3 on the numpad. And with that edge loop selected, I'm going to press E to extrude, Y to restrict it to the Y axis, just like that, and bring it somewhere towards the back. Scale it down a little bit, doesn't poke through the outer shell. And now I'm going to add some loop cuts with Ctrl R. I think 3 is more than enough, just really basic geometry here. And Alt click these and scale them up to make that inner circular space. So Alt click and press S for scale. And that's all you need to do. It's not perfect. And one last thing that we need to do is also add a face to the back of that object, which I then realized I haven't done yet. So let's just switch to that one there. And with that done, we can press the F key. But before I do that, I'm going to scale it down just a little bit. And press the F key to create a face to fill it, and I to inset it, like that. That's all it needs. And with that done, I can then select those faces and apply or assign the rubber material. So I'm going to isolate that part again. And you can see there we have everything's chrome. So I'm going to select these inner faces. Probably helps to turn off the modifiers to see what you're doing. So let's switch off the subdiv modifier. I'm going to add an edge loop there. So I want that to be the boundary between the rubber material and the chrome. So back to face mode, select that, Control numpad plus to select them, and assign the rubber material. Let's turn on subdiv again. There you go, it's nice and dark inside there now. And whilst I'm here, let's add some bevels to these edge loops. So with those selected, Control B, not that one there of course. And let's press Control B. I'm going to add or increase the shape to 1, so you get those nice hard edges. And there you go. Trust me, it's all there, it's all working fine, but it would depend on your lighting, how much you can see of the lens materials. And finally, I decided that the reason I made these cuts here is because I wanted to add the Italian colours to the robot as well. So I thought that'd be a cool place to do it. Luckily there were 3 slots in the side of the head, and there's 3 colours for Italy. So I guess that's fate, right? So let's create the materials. So I'm going to start with colour 1, which I believe is the green. And I went onto the internet, and I think I ended up going to Wikipedia and found the flag there and sampled the, or grabbed the hex value from there. So I'm going to copy these nodes from the metallic blue and paste it onto the Italy color 1. And just quickly connect those up into the roughness and the normal. All that's left to do now is change the color, of course, and assign the color to those faces. So tap into edit mode, select those faces there, select the color 1 and assign it. And let's change the color now. You can see there that's working. I'll just zoom in there, and that's the hex value that I used for the green, or I found on the internet anyway for the green. That probably should be metallic, I don't know why it wasn't, so we'll put that up, and that should be, I think that was it 0.8 or something, or did I leave it as 0.5? Yeah, you can see there I'm checking the values. So 0.8. Make sure they're the same. Why not? Alright, if you're happy with that, let's duplicate the Italy 1 color. Rename it to color 2. That's like an off-white color. And the third one is a red, of course. And do the same thing as we've just done. That's looking really cool. It's a nice touch. However, on the other side, it's because we're using the mirror modifier, the colors on the other side are in the wrong orientation or order. the green should be on the left, the red on the right. So we need to apply the mirror modifier and then select these faces on the flip side. Just assign the right color to the right faces. Very quickly, and that's as simple as that. And the 3 cuts we made earlier on here work really well in that we can assign the colors here as well. So let's assign the green. Let's add that, new slot, select the color 1, assign, select the edge loop there with Alt click, assign color 2, and finally color 3. Awesome. Thought that was a nice touch. You could go crazy with this stuff. You can add these anywhere. And finally, I need to add the, make this blue and then add the chrome just at the front part there. And the seam in the middle, I'm going to add the rubber material as usual. And that's it, folks. I hope you enjoyed that. I might do another version of this where everything's all grungy and dirtied up. So I'll do that at some point in the future. And there's me adding the mirror modifier to the lenses, which I forgot to do earlier. So anyway, I hope you really enjoyed this series. I know I did. It's great fun. And if you like my videos, a like and a subscribe would be hugely appreciated. Let's just have a look at that, how that looks now. And there you go. That's the final product. So there you have it, folks. I'll see you in the next one. For now, I'll let this play out. Take care. See you next time. Bye.